Hey guys, it's Catherine Morgan here and welcome to my YouTube channel. Now this channel is here to bring you short but powerful videos to help you to navigate both the emotional side of money, our relationship with money, and the practical steps to help you to reduce financial anxiety and become more financially empowered to deserve wealth, grow wealth, and create wealth. My name's Catherine and I'm a qualified financial planner and international multi-award winning financial coach. That's a bit of a mouthful. So welcome to my channel. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Make sure that you hit the like and subscribe button and do leave me a comment below and let me know what was your biggest takeaway from listening to this video. Speak to you soon. So I wanted to cover today 6 reasons or 6 tips, if you like, as to how we can improve our financial well-being and be more financially empowered. This is going to be quite practical. So if you haven't got a pen and paper to hand, go and grab one because I want you to make some notes around this training this evening. And we're not going to go for any longer than about 20 minutes to half an hour. I show up in here every Friday. So the first thing I want to talk about then is in the lead up to our relationship with money, I want to talk about why is it that we experience the need for emotional spending. And let me know whether you can resonate with this. But when it comes to emotional spending, what we have to think about is if we want to change our behaviours around money, we can't just wake up one day and say, I need to stop overspending, because it's not that easy. It doesn't work like that because we're talking to the conscious mind. What we have to do is speak to the unconscious mind, the subconscious beliefs that we all hold and store. And lots of these beliefs go right the way back to when we were very, very little. So we have to learn how to speak to the unconscious mind in order to change the behaviours that we are conscious of, things that we tell ourselves every day. Now, one of the things that happens when it comes to emotional spending or impulse spending is that what happens is that we get an event that happens, something that triggers us to feel an emotion. And our brain then goes into something called emotional flooding. So what happens is that the emotion completely overrides logic. We feel stressed, anxious, down. We might feel fear, we might be bored, but there's an overriding emotion that floods the brain. And then we have got into the habit of taking action, i.e. there's a behaviour that's then attached to that emotion. So I want to talk you through a little exercise that you can write down. You don't have to do this exercise right now, but you can make a note of it and work this through when you've got some time with yourself. And I'd suggest that you do this exercise by yourself where you've got a nice, safe, quiet environment. Hi, Andrea. So let me talk you through this exercise. So it's what I would call changing your financial behaviours exercise. So the first thing to think about is, what is the event that happened that caused you to behave in a spontaneous way around money? So write down the activating event. What was that activating event? Was it that you walked out of work, you'd had an argument with your boss and you went to the shops? Was it you were bored at lunchtime, you were wandering around and you bought something? Was it that you were bored on the couch in the evening, surfing the net, scrolling, and you bought something? Was it that you were just feeling really bad about yourself, not feeling very confident, lack of self-worth, which made you think about buying something that would make you feel better, or the perception is that it would make you feel better? So think about the event. Think about the last time that it happened. What was the activating event? And once you've got some clarity around what that event was, the second step then is to think about what was the behaviour that was related to that event. So did you overspend? Did you underspend? This can be applied in exactly the same situation. So maybe you wanted to buy something, but you were like, oh no, I can't spend that on myself because I'd feel guilty. So the behaviour might be, under giving to yourself. Maybe that behavior is redirected to somebody else. Maybe you are very giving in your relationship with money to family members or your children, for example. No problem with spending money on the kids, but not on yourself. Maybe the behavior might be that you procrastinated or you found it difficult to make a decision. So think about the behavior that related to the specific event that you're thinking about right now. So that's the second step. The third step then is to think about the consequences of your behavior. So what I always do is think about, well, first of all, what was the benefit? Before you go into the downside, think about the benefit of you taking whatever action you took, or whatever the behavior was, might be inaction rather than action. Think about what was the consequence of that behavior, and what was the benefit. So let's say, for example, I was feeling bored, I was surfing Amazon, I bought 3 candles. That's the behavior, that was the action you took. The consequences, I've now got 3 beautiful candles, that's the benefit. But the challenge, well, I didn't really need 3 candles, and actually I had to put up my credit card because I didn't have the available money to spend. That's the consequence. So think about what the consequence is. Hi Asta, lovely to see you. So that's the event, what happened. What was the behavior that related to that, and what was the consequence? Negative and positive. Okay. So once you've got to those steps, then you want to think about, okay, so how were you feeling at that moment? Were you hungry? Were you nervous? Were you anxious? Were you tired? Were you bored? Were you feeling self-critical? What was the emotion that sat behind that event? And if you can't identify how you were feeling because you're thinking about something that happened maybe a few weeks ago or last week or yesterday, bring some curiosity to this next time this happens. So just pause and think, how am I feeling right now? Am I bored? Am I stressed? Am I tired? Think about that underlying emotion. Maybe were you lonely? Were you scared? Were you fearful? Were you just really excited and happy and wanted to celebrate? Think about the underlying emotion. And the next step I want you to write down is who else was involved. Okay, so was it just you? Were you with somebody? Were you with a partner? Were you with a friend? Were you with your children? Who were you with when you were making those decisions? Okay. The next step then is to acknowledge, where were you? Were you at home? Were you in the bedroom? Were you in the kitchen? Were you at work? Were you on the high street? Where were you? And just write that down. Where were you at the time of that event? The next question then is, when was it? Morning, afternoon, evening, after work, before everybody else got up out of bed, in the middle of the night, when you were feeding your kids, when you just come home from the pub, probably not recently, right? But where were you at the time of that decision? Write that down. The next thing then is to think about, okay, so what were you thinking about at that time? What was the belief that sat behind that behavior? Were you telling yourself, well, if I just buy this one more course, I feel better, more confident. If I just buy this another candle, I'll feel happier. If I just do that one thing that you've identified, what's the belief that may be attached to that? So you believe you'll be better, you'll feel better, you'll do better, you'll stop procrastinating, it will help you manage your time better, it will help you organize your business better. What's the belief behind the action that you took? So for example, let's say you bought a dress, and the belief there might be you bought it because you were feeling crap about your body because maybe you put on a few pounds over lockdown. And the belief therefore is that if I buy this dress, I will feel slimmer, let's say. I'm actually using a personal experience here. So that's the belief. The belief is I will feel better about myself if I buy this dress. So then you can think about, well, what were my alternative options? What could I have done differently to create that same feeling? What could I have done differently in that situation? Maybe gone to my wardrobe and had a look at what I already had, and then probably came to the conclusion that I don't need another dress. I can just wear one that I feel most comfortable with. And maybe the ones that I don't feel comfortable with, fold them up and put them away out of sight, so I don't feel bad every time I open up my wardrobe doors. That's an example of an alternative behaviour that I could have took to create the same emotion, positive emotion of feeling better about myself without buying that extra dress. Does that make sense? And then the final part to this exercise is, how can you predict when you might be in a similar situation? So for example, if you know that you have a tendency to buy stuff on Amazon when you're in the bath, or in the evenings when you come home from work and you've got nothing else to do, then do something different. Put your phone in the kitchen so it's not with you. Hide the apps off your phone. Set a timer on your phone, or an alert or a notification or something that pings up to remind you that you don't necessarily need to take that action. Have a screensaver, something, a quote or something on your phone that can remind you of the positive feeling that you were looking to create in the first place. So I am worthy, I am enough. All of those positive affirmations that you can continue to tell your subconscious that you are good enough. Because maybe the belief there is that, well, if I buy this new dress, I'll feel better. It's not going to, it may, in the short term, you might feel better, but in the long term, it's not going to harbour a more positive relationship with your body. So can you see there that you go through those steps? So you start with the activating event. What was happening at the time? What did you do? What was the behaviour? So what was the action or inaction that you took? What were the consequences, good and bad, of that action? How were you feeling at the time? Hungry, sad, stressed, anxious, fearful, nervous, all of those emotions. Who else was involved in that process, or was it just with yourself? Where were you? When was it? Morning, evening, lunchtime, late evening, middle of the night? When was it? What was the belief that was attached to that behaviour, and what could you have done differently or instead of? And then how could you predict that happening again to maybe change the outcome? So that's what I would, that's a typical exercise that you could just follow through to really help you to change some of the financial behaviours that maybe are not working in your favour, maybe are self-sabotaging, maybe are causing you to continuously go into debt or live in your overdraft. Because it's about changing habits at root, and changing habits at root is very difficult to do at the conscious level. Because if you probably found, if you wake up and say, I want to go to the gym tomorrow, that's a conscious decision. But if it's not supported by our unconscious things that we tell ourselves, then it's not going to work. It might work temporarily, but then you'll fall off the beaten track because it's not in kind of embedded into our subconscious beliefs. And there's lots of ways that you can embed it into your subconscious beliefs. So when I do one-to-one transformational work with clients, for example, I use NLP techniques. I use much deeper money exercises, transformation exercises, to change it at the unconscious level. But what you can do is take yourself through those steps and journal around those questions. And that can be really empowering. And the beauty about journaling is if you do it first thing in the morning as well, when you've just woken up, you can actually talk very easily directly to your unconscious beliefs when you're just in that kind of, when you're just waking up and you're a little bit worried, a little bit kind of, why, before you start thinking about what's happening for the day, grab a piece of paper and a pen and just write out what's coming up for you. Because often those beliefs that come up can be really empowering to actually shift some of our, the things that we tell ourselves that are not helping, that are self-sabotaging. A couple of other things to talk about as well this evening. One is about human biases. So one of the areas that I study is behavioural finance. And in this particular field, we often talk about heuristics, which is basically human biases. And one of the human biases that I see all of the time is what we call catastrophic thinking. And the downside of catastrophic thinking is what happens is we tell ourselves stories of the future. We tell ourselves stories of things that haven't actually happened. And this really is what anxiety is partly to do with, right? Anxiety is about something, a fear that hasn't necessarily happened. or it's an anxiety of fear that's of something that might happen because of a previous experience that we're linking it back to. We're attaching the meaning to a previous experience. So I'll give you an example of this. So my youngest son, when he was born, had meningitis, and he was very, very poorly. And I went into a deep state of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, after he came out of hospital. And for me, every time I hear a child cry, a baby cry, instantly takes me back to this moment in hospital when he was being jabbed with needles and I couldn't do anything about it. And so the meaning I attach to children crying now is anxiety, and I can't stand it. I'm like, oh, I just want to go and pick that baby up and cuddle them and stop them from crying, which in reality is not it's not possible, right? Some kids cried because they're hungry or they're tired. So, but that's the meaning that I have attached to children that cry. And so I catastrophize, and every time a child cries, I think, well, maybe they're in pain. And then I start to catastrophize it and think, oh, well, I need to do something. And that sets my anxiety off. So I've learned how to control that now. I've learned how to really manage that and actually to remember that actually that's not the case. But catastrophic thinking can prevent us from taking action. Another good example of this is the stock market. When the stock market's come down, a lot of clients panic and think, oh gosh, I need to come out of the market because the stock market's coming down, and all the newspapers talk about it. The stock market's plummeting, everyone comes out. And it's what they call herd mentality. So we like to follow the crowd. Have you ever noticed that when someone else is doing something, we're like, maybe I should do the same, right? And the reason that is for herd mentality, because we believe that, well, that must be the right thing to do because everybody else is doing it. And that's not always the case. It's just because that's a human bias that we like to follow the crowd. And if any of you follow the work of Warren Buffett, who's a very, very famous multi-millionaire, billionaire, he talks about investing at a time when his famous quote is, be fearful when the markets are greedy and be greedy when the markets are fearful. So in other words, be fearful when the market is greedy. So when everyone's panicking, like, keep your cool. And when the markets come down, that's when we should be investing, because share prices are coming down. It's like a bit like buying clothes in the sale. You want to buy them when they're at sale price, not when they're at full price. And I bet all of you would flock towards John Lewis right now if they slapped a sale banner on the front of their store. So why don't we do the same with the stock market? And that's because of other human biases of fear of loss or loss aversion. So without going into the logistics of all of this is what I teach in my financial coaching training program, actually with financial advisors, or part of what I teach. But this is about letting go of stories of the future, things that actually haven't even happened, and stop comparing yourselves to everybody else and getting FOMO. FOMO is actually a condition, like a psychological condition, is because if you think about it, comparisonitis, its main objective is to create a sense of lack. Comparisonitis' main objective is to create a sense of lack. So when we compare ourselves to everybody else, what are we doing? Putting ourselves in a state of lack, telling ourselves what we do not have. And then we forget about all the things that we do have. So I don't know about you, but I would far rather be a chief abundance officer, in charge of what I can control, and in charge of being in a state of gratitude and what is right for me based on my current situation, not on anybody else's. And remember that comparisonitis' main objective is to create a sense of lack. So we lose our sense of purpose, we lose our sense of vision, we lose sense of what we should do next, because we start comparing ourselves to everybody else. And when we feel anxious, therefore, about our financial situation, it affects our ability to follow any advice. It affects our ability to change. It affects our ability to have financial empowerment. So you're giving away your power by comparing yourself to everybody else. So don't do it, ladies. Remember where you're at, and remember it's the small steps of imperfection that create a sense of financial empowerment. Every step you take Every small step of imperfect action creates that sense of well-being for you. Thanks so much for listening, guys. I really hope that you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please do me a big favour and leave me a comment below this video and let me know, what was your one biggest takeaway? What are you going to do differently as a result of watching today's video? Now, you can go ahead and check out more free resources available to you at the website, which is themoneypanel.co.uk, or please feel free to tune into our weekly podcast on all of the typical podcast channels. That's In Her Financial Shoes. And remember, small steps, big wins. Let's go.